Hello everyone and welcome to today's lesson. Before we start building chords and constructing melodies and bass lines and doing all the exciting things, we first have to make sure that we know what music is actually made of. That is why in today's lesson, you are going to review your knowledge on the following concepts: the half step, the whole step, the chromatic scale, the major scale, and diatonic intervals within a major scale. Let's go ahead and get started. We are going to start on the middle C. It finds itself in the middle of the keyboard, and we could think of it as being in the center of our musical system. The middle C is surrounded by other notes, and its closest neighbor is C sharp, just a little bit above middle C. Music in general is about relationships between notes. Now, the relationship between these two notes, the C and the C sharp right above it, is called a half step. The half step is the smallest distance between two notes in Western music. Of course, it is common and absolutely possible to sing or play two notes that are closer to each other than a half step apart. But such small distances are almost never notated. In general, the topic of notes that are in between C and C sharp is a fascinating topic, but it is not the focus of today's lesson. If you are interested in it, you can always shoot me an email and we can chat about it. Now, if you continue to build half steps up from C to C sharp, from C sharp to D, then from D to D sharp, from D sharp to E, and so on, all the way up to C above middle C, you are going to end up with a chromatic scale. Think of it as a staircase. La scala in Italian means a staircase, and it takes you from the floor of the middle C to the floor above. The chromatic scale is made of 12 notes, and it consists of half steps only. Out of these 12 notes, anything basically from Bach to Michael Jackson has been made, and the great music producer Quincy Jones has said there are only 12 notes, and you could do anything with these 12 notes. You're probably thinking now, if there is something like a half step, well, there must surely be something like a whole step too. And you are absolutely right. If we go again from our middle C, 2 half steps up from C to C sharp and from C sharp to D, that relationship between C and D is a whole step. From a combination of half steps and whole steps, we could build another kind of a scale. And that scale is going to be called the major scale. This is the pattern of the major scale. We're going to start on the middle C again. From middle C to D, there is a whole step. From D to E, another whole step. From E to F, a half step. Then we are going to go in whole steps again, from F to G, from G to A, and from A to B. And then we're going to finish again with a half step. It is very important that you remember and are able to recognize the pattern of the major scale. It's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, I have said earlier that music in general is about relationships between notes. And now the easiest and the best way to describe these relationships is to use the concept of intervals. I am going to show you what intervals can be found within the C major scale. Let's start on the first degree of that scale. From the first degree, the C, you could go to the second degree, the D. That interval is a second because we went to the second degree of the scale. But you could also jump from the first degree to the third. That interval will be called a third. You could jump from the first to the fourth and get an interval of a fourth. And you could do the same from the first to the fifth, from the first to the sixth, from the first to the seventh degree of the scale, and all the way up from the first to the eighth degree of the scale. Take a look at these intervals: the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and the eighth. Some of those are special. They are called perfect intervals. The fourth, the fifth, and the eighth are perfect intervals. Why? Because the size of the perfect intervals never changes. No matter what scale you find yourself in, the size of the fourth, the size of the fifth, and the size of the eighth will never change. Well, that is not the case with something like a third or a sixth. If you find yourself, for example, in a minor scale, these intervals will change. So it is important to remember that in a major scale, the intervals of the second, of the third, of the sixth, and of the seventh are major, while the intervals of the fourth, the fifth, and the eighth are perfect. This is it for today's lesson. You have reviewed the following concepts: the half step and the whole step, the chromatic scale and the major scale, and the intervals within a major scale. Go on to the next parts of the lesson, in which you will be able to explore these concepts further and to practice your knowledge to develop your skills.